What's up, guys? It's John with National Sports Entertainment, and I wanted to go into this little underline thing was going to bother my OCD. I wanted to go into the 30 teams in the NBA, and people were asking me to do a complete breakdown, and I've been wanting to, so I've been working with this crude graph here just to see basically the best way to put these teams into categories. So essentially, because we have a simulator app which I've used before, and I'll be using that for a complete breakdown of, again, the playoffs haven't happened yet, but who I think is going to be up against each other. And essentially, while I'm filling these categories in, and we'll run through them in a second, I'll obviously be going into about where I see these teams as far as division, if they're going to win their division, if they're going to be a wild card, play in, etc. So, the first one to note is obviously probably the most obvious, and it kind of speaks for itself. Pick another sport. That just for the fans of these teams. I think very early on, we're going to see that these teams just have nothing. They don't have a leg to stand on, in my opinion, and I don't think it's going to change. So there's, in my opinion, the teams that are just going to be very bad, and not much is going to change that. So your Hornets from last year, from beginning, from buzzer to buzzer, your Blazers from last year, teams like that. So the next category is going to be Pat Bev reacts to play in, and the reason for that category is I don't think these teams are necessarily going to do bad, but I think they're teams that aren't that good that are going to wind up doing better than expected. So examples would be, obviously, the Thunder even making the play-in last year. Probably considered a win for the fans, although they were never a threat to do anything besides that. And I don't think that's going to change. And the same this year. I think there's going to be a few teams that are the Thunder from last year. I'm just here to rob the public, obviously. These teams are going to be the teams. The distinction between them and Pat Bev is, again, the teams here that rob the public are ones that people will actually believe can make the run and win the finals. Whereas the tier beneath, nobody's actually going to believe that they can win the finals. They're just probably going to overperform, maybe have a Cinderella type story. So, and the distinction between robbing the public and the bridesmaids is the bridesmaids, I have them making essentially their respective conference championships. So even if they don't win a ring, I still think that they're going to be right up there and make the finals or come very close. Put a ring on it, just the team or teams that I believe are going to make the finals. So obviously, there'll only be two in that spot. Now, there's still some open theories I have, but I'm just going to go with basically my preseason and my current state of logic as far as what I think is going to happen. And it's one that I really have to think about because they're doing a lot of crazy things. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and start this off. Atlanta Hawks. For the Atlanta Hawks, this is a really tough one. I'm going to put them in the I'm just here to rob the public category for the simple fact that I think they're going to be a bad team this year. I really do. I want to put them in pick another sport, but I don't think, even if they, make the playoffs, then obviously you still have to say, okay, well, they're not a bottom dweller. So that's why I don't have them in the bottom tier. The reason I don't have them in Pat Bev playing reacts is because, again, they're not a team like the Pistons that can just kind of come out of nowhere that nobody's expecting to do anything. So they have players, they have Capella, they got Trey, Collins, Hunter. They have a good squad. They got a new coach. There's no reason they shouldn't be a good team. I just don't think they're going to be a good team. So personally, again, I don't see the Hawks doing much different than a couple years prior. Coming into the year, my focus was on how they were going to portray Trey. And they've portrayed poor Trey pretty bad here. He's had some really good games. I think he's coming off a good game if I'm not mistaken, but just nothing. He's not getting the Donovan Mitchell treatment or the SGA treatment, things of that nature. Boston Celtics were early on, but it's just who I like. Right now, on the Eastern side, the Celtics are my pick to go to the finals. The second they got Drew Holiday and the Bucks got Dame, it basically solidified it for me. And then we have all this drama going on with the Sixers. And I think the Sixers trade is not as detrimental as a lot of people think. I don't think it's going to make them fall off a cliff. Then again, I'm not saying it's going to make them much better either, but I'll be going into them obviously when they come up. It is funny, last year my pick for the finals was Clippers Sixers. I even went into how there was like a connection between the teams. I basically had it because of Doc. I thought Doc getting revenge on his former team was interesting. Again, I like the Celtics this year because they made all the championship moves. They re-signed the important players. They didn't make any crazy trades. They added somebody who is a proven champion. These are all things that they do with the teams that wind up getting the rings. So by adding, in my opinion, the exact right quality of players, Porzingis isn't a megastar, but he's someone that's going to help the team a lot. He's already doing good. Drew Holiday knows how to win. They're definitely going to set up them and the Bucks, in my opinion, them versus the Bucks at some point. So, yeah, I like the Celtics to represent the East. Again, you lock down Brown and Tatum for a while. It just shows they want to build them as somewhat of a dynasty. So I think getting back to the finals would be definitely a good start. Next, we have the Chicago Bulls. And ironically, this one's just going to go into pick another sport. I think Chicago's going to have a really rough year. Maybe the Blackhawks will have a good year. I just don't see them doing much. If anything, I think they're going to trade DeRozan and get some young guys, claim that they're rebuilding. DeRozan might go to a contender. He might go to Philly, something like that. And I feel like his name's been thrown around a lot. By the way, if you look at the Bulls logo upside down, it is a crab on a spacecraft. My phone might flip if I try it. Yeah, there you go. It's an alien crab. See, it's an alien on a crab spacecraft. You can clearly see the alien steering some kind of spacecraft. Some people say he's mounting an upside down crab, but once I saw that, it kind of blew my mind. I didn't know if anyone else noticed that, but yeah, I found that interesting. So yeah, I just don't think the Bulls, they remind me of the Hawks. Like I said, I almost want to put them in the same category. Only the Bulls I can actually see doing worse than the Hawks. Trading someone like DeRozan, maybe Levine, just trading one of their stars, and just having a complete tanked season. Again, they're shaming MJ this year. I think they are, at least. Why not shame his team, right? Brooklyn Nets is an interesting one because they have all these decent players, and no stars. So the question is, are they going to draw? Or, not a lot of people are picking them, of course. I personally think I'm going to put him in the Pat Bev Reacts category because I think with this squad on a fresh season, if they get to the playoffs, which I'm really on the fence with if they do or don't, but I think there's a better chance than not they do, just even looking at the odds. I think there's a really good chance that fans are going to take that as a win. And they could even get a crazy first round upset. I could see a good team in the East, like, not a good team, but a team that we know to be good, getting upset in the first round. So I'm going to put the Nets in this category. And, yeah, I'm going to leave them there. I don't think they're going to do that bad. I think they're going to have an okay year. I went into this before. It seemed to me like they're trying to push Bridges the same way they pushed Kawhi. He went to another team, and then he wound up obviously doing very good with Toronto. And Bridges started his career the same way, where he was a defensive-oriented player, and then he had to take on a bigger role, and he became one of the better two-way players in the league. So, Kawhi I'm talking about, but it seems like Bridges is on that track, so I like them for that category. Clippers, to me, is a really easy one. They are just here to rob the public, especially now that they got James Harden. You got Harden and Westbrook back together, and again, I don't think they're giving Harden a ring, and I also don't think there's going to be a good bit of money going on the Clippers. Looking at the ESPN polls, the NBA.com polls, most people are saying the Clippers got the better end of that trade, and that I believe they are now the favorite to win the West, according to ESPN. So there's going to be money on the Clippers. And you look at the lineup, you know, I think outside of injuries, which I think with most people, the public doesn't take injuries into account. When it comes to George and Kawhi, they probably do because they're just so darn injury prone. But then you still have a pretty good team without them, so I think they're going to be a great team too. They'll obviously have a playoff year, get in the playoffs. I just don't think they're going to do much. So I think they're going to just steal a lot of the public's money. Now, next is the Hornets, and for the Hornets, they're going right here at the Nets as far as Pat Bev reacts. Again, these are your play-in teams, the teams that get in and they are able to win a play-in, even though most probably didn't even have them in the playoffs, or they just slightly outperform in the playoffs. I do have the Hornets, just to throw it out there, as a play-in team. The Hornets and Wizards are the two teams that I have making the play-in this year. I have the Bulls getting flipped out, and I'll be going into basically all of my playoff picks. I just thought it'd be better to do that on my simulation video, but I do have the Hornets making the play-in. I think they got rid of Michael Jordan. It's not a coincidence. Miller's looking pretty good. Ball is looking pretty good. So I have a feeling that the Hornets are gonna, and even Rozier, they have some guys some role players that are doing their job. So I think the Hornets get pushed. Again, only 5 teams don't make the play-in. And it's usually by a couple games. So they can sell the Hornets as a playoff team. They'd be exciting, and I think that's what they're going to do. Cleveland's an interesting one, and this might be a very hot take, but I'm going to put them in this category right here. For the simple fact that, again, it just seems to be too focused around Donovan Mitchell. It's reminded me of when DeMar first got to Chicago, and I don't think Cleveland, even if Cleveland just say got a play-in, that would be considered a big step back for them. So I think they're going to disappoint people, but at the same time, they're not good enough to rob the public. So I don't have them going deep or anything. I think there's a good chance they miss the playoffs, to be honest. I have a feeling they're going to be sellers come trade deadline time. We're going to see Mitchell's name, Mobley's name thrown around a lot. So I don't see too much happening for Cleveland this year. I think between them and Chicago, they have a lot of rebuilding to do. As far as Denver, I'm going to put them in the bridesmaids category. I don't think that they're going back. I wouldn't be absolutely shocked if they did, just because of how well they're building them. And we have to remember Jokic. They keep saying how he's going to retire early. Just kind of a little bit of early indication, because of course they can't let him continue at this pace and then put him ahead of Shaq and all these other guys, and maybe even Tim Duncan if he gets another ring or two. He's already got the MVPs. He's got all the accolades, the stats. So I don't expect him to play long or win a bunch. But getting back to the finals, certainly something I could see him doing. Again, if you want to build a team that looks like this is, a true championship team, then you keep them looking strong for a while. You don't have them look terrible the next year. And I don't think it's a coincidence they're starting off so good this year. So I think we might even see a better regular season from the Nuggets this year. I don't have them getting back to the finals. I like 2 other teams in the West better. Rockets is an interesting one because, of course, you don't expect much out of them. So it's a little tougher to put them in the pick another sport category. But I don't think that they're going to really exceed any expectations either. I still don't have them making the playoffs or the play-in. I thought about maybe they make a play-in. Jabari Smith, he went back to the G League so he could brush up. They love that kind of stuff. Green's looking pretty good. They got a good young roster, but I still think they're missing a piece or two. I'm going to just stick them in this category because at the end of the day, I don't think Houston Rocket fans are going to be suspending their disbelief too much. So that's just what I have. Now here's a couple very interesting ones in a row, and maybe it's fitting that they're in this order. So for the Lakers, right now, simply because they're giving me, and I went on many times saying how I didn't think they were going to win a championship until they got Bronny, or until LeBron got Bronny, and then he would win his last one, passing Steph, finishing with 5, less than Michael, and he wins one with his son. That being said, they are being treated a lot different this year, and they're off to like a little slow start, so public isn't going to be slamming them. Adding the simple guys like Christian Wood, Taurean Prince. Those are the championship moves that these teams do. They add a couple little guys instead of a megastar or two, and it usually works out for them. So I have two teams that I think are going to match up against who I think is going to be the Celtics. The Lakers are one of them, and if you look at the history between them, it does make a lot of sense to do it this year, in my opinion. People are talking about 24. Obviously, we had Kobe. He won against the Celtics, and there's a lot of commonalities. They're going for I think they'd be both going for their 18th ring, I believe. So you have a lot of similarities with these teams, and their history is very deep. There is another team I'm looking at in the West, I'll be honest. So I'm not sure if I'm just going to make it a three-way race and cop out, or stick them in the bridesmaids category. But there's another team I'm looking at just because of, again, some interesting factors and the way they're being pushed. Next, we have the Milwaukee Bucks, and I think I'm going to put them in bridesmaids because while they're going to definitely rob the public, I also believe they're going to be legit. I think that they're going to be right up there with the Celtics, and it's really going to be who's good enough to beat the Bucks, and I think the Celtics are going to be that team. So when the Bucks are going to be, the team that's the hunted, it's hard for me to not have them finishing top four, which I believe they will. There's a shot they get knocked out, in the second round of the playoffs, but they're making a run. They're not going to have hiccups, in my opinion. They're going to do very strongly this year. I don't think they're going to be like some other teams where they get somebody and not much happens. Now, this one, again, might be a hot take, and again, this doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be a terrible team. I just think that the Heat are not going to be much of what they were last year this year. I think it was like a one-off Cinderella story. If they were going to give it to Jimmy, they would have. And even their backups, as we can see, aren't being pushed too well. Again, this doesn't mean because the Heat are coming off the finals. So, again, I could put them in the Pat Bev reacts category, but I don't think fans would be enthused or surprised if the Heat got a 6-7 seed and then got booted in the first round. It would just be solid. So, I honestly think there's a chance they might just finish flat. I really do. I know Jimmy's not leaving. He said he's retiring in Miami. He just said that pretty recently. It would look pretty bad if he left. Of course, anything can happen. But again, I just think we're going to see a drop-off from a significant drop-off from these teams this year. They might want to run Boston versus the Heat again, let Boston get their revenge. Even if that happens, I think it's going to be like in the first round, and the Heat get pummeled. So, I don't see the Heat even coming close to last year. Even if I had them winning a playoff game, I'd consider sticking them in a higher category, but this is just what I think is going to happen. So Dallas Mavericks, definitely toss between these two. And I'm going to put them in I'm here to rob the public for the simple reason that there's a ton of teams in the West that have claim that they can make a run. I think of those teams, the Mavericks are going to have a lot of money going on them, especially if people see them like they are, starting off with a good year. So for me, I just think I think Luka is going to win MVP, which makes me believe they're not going to win a championship. They were my other team, just so you know. Even though I have the Nuggets higher ranked, if it wasn't the Lakers, it was going to be the Mavericks. So just say the Lakers don't do it. My backup choice is the Mavericks. I think that there's a few things with Dallas that are very interesting this year. And again, I think last year might have been kind of like what they're doing with San Francisco. McCaffrey got there. Everyone piled money on them. They did the same when Kyrie got here this year. So at first I was thinking, okay, maybe they basically repeat last year but have obviously a better record. But they just don't look crazy good. But since they're starting off so hot, they're going to have a good bit of money coming in. And I think that there's a good chance that the Mavericks could do it, but I think it's going to be Luka to get the MVP, and I think we might even just see a rematch, Lakers Nuggets in the Western Conference Finals. So that's why I ranked them this way. Next is this one doesn't even hide. It looks like some kind of Satan symbol. I'm thinking this is the Pelicans. I could be wrong, but it's looking like the Pelicans. And I'm going to rank the Pelicans up here because based off of the seasons that they've had, everyone's expecting Zion to bust. Much like Luka, I think Zion's going to come out and be in the MVP category. I think he's going to be, quote, unstoppable, where he's just so strong and athletic, unlike before, and he's actually productive and he's healthy. So I think you're probably going to have money going on the Pelicans, but nowhere near the amount that's going on the Clippers and the Mavericks. So I do think the Pelicans will be formidable. I think people will believe in them, and they're too good for me to put in the Pat Bev Reacts category. You know, I know last year they weren't amazing, but with a healthy Zion, I think they're going to have a good record. I don't think fans would accept them just getting in the playoffs and a first round elimination. That happened 2 years ago with the Suns, and that was kind of, people expected improvement. So I'm going to stick them in that category. Knicks are an interesting one because I think they might make a trade, and I'm not sure if it's going to be for a star or if they're going to trade somebody like Randall for picks or something of that nature. I'm going to put them just because, again, it depends on if they get traded or not. For now, I'm just going to stick them in the pick another sport category. And I know it seems like there's a lot of teams in here that it's like, there's worse teams than this, the Magic, things like that. I do get that, but again, I'm judging these teams based off of how they are expected to do. So, again, while they could, I do think they will get into the playoffs. I think they'll probably be like a first round bump. So again, when I do my playoff video, it'll be more specific as far as exact standings, things of that nature. This is just basically where I see the teams as far as from a Vegas handle, from value standpoint. So like the Knicks, if they finish below 500 or if they finish akin to the way the Raptors finished last year, to me, after finishing, I think they were like a 5 seed or something like that, it would be a pretty big drop off. So again, when the fans aren't expecting much, or when they are expecting improvement, or at least not regression, then I would find another category. But I think for the Knicks, for the Heat, if they barely make the playoffs or they get pummeled in the first round, the Cavs another one, and the Cavs, like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if they missed the playoffs, then I just don't think the fans are going to be too happy. Thunder now. Thunder definitely qualify for Pat Bev Reacts, because last year they barely made the play and they got booted by the Timberwolves. And this year I think they're definitely going to be a playoff team, not a play-in team. If they are a play-in team, I think it's going to be a 7-8 seed, not a 9-10 seed, so they'll have to lose twice. But I do think the way they're pushing Chet, obviously SGA, the culture, they're really talking about the culture. I wouldn't even be surprised if the Clippers wound up, even though he's not worth any money, so it would make no sense. They lie about the franchise tag anyway, or the franchise cap. I wouldn't be surprised if they traded Russ back to Oklahoma City, but, you know, just to be a veteran. But even without him, I think that they're a great draw. And again, they remind me of the Hornets. The Hornets remind me of the Thunder last year. So this year, I think the Hornets will be the team that sneaks into the playoffs. Whereas last year, I think it's going to be... Last year, it was the Thunder, and I think they're going to improve. For the Magic, they also go in here. Because while the fans aren't expecting much, I think their expectations are going to be their results. So I think they're going to expect basically maybe them to have a couple nice games. I have them winning tonight. So, I mean, well, I have them covering, but I think they're going to win tonight. It is International Magic Day. It was brought up to my attention. But either way, I just don't think they're going to do much crazy this year. There's a lot of up-and-comers in the East. Teams being pushed where they weren't last year. So I think it's just going to be more of the same for the Magic. So I'm going to leave them right here with the Blazers. And there's a lot of teams in this category, but let's be honest, there's a lot of teams that we just know aren't going to do anything. So, again, I'm not saying that the Cavaliers and the Rockets are going to finish with the same record. What I'm saying is if you look at the drop-off, what the drop-off I believe we're going to see with the Cavaliers and Rockets, it's going to be about as impressive. So, yeah, I don't think the Blazers are going to do anything. They have to build around Shadon and Scoot. It's going to be at least a year or so. They basically made that abundantly clear. Pacers. I'm going to put them all the way up here in bridesmaids because again, we're also going off of results, and even while Pat Bev reacts would fit them maybe a little better because let's just say they get a first round win, right? And then they lose in the second round, or they finish with a top three record, then you could argue that that the fans are going to be more than overjoyed, while we all know they're not going deep into the playoffs. But I'm going to put them in this category simply because I think they're going to finish with a top seed. And when you have a top seeded team, not number one, but I think they will finish with a top three seed. I don't know why. They reminded me a lot of the Kings from last year, where I didn't believe at first. I thought they were kind of boring, and then suddenly they really started looking good. So I think the Pacers, again, you're not going to have a lot of money on them, so they're not really here, they're not red herrings. So I think they're going to have a marked improvement from last year. I do think they'll make the playoffs. And I think they'll basically play the role that the Cavaliers played last year, where they were good. You could have made the argument, but nobody really thought that they were going to go. So they're not as believable as, say, the Nuggets or Bucks or Pelicans even. But I think by the end of the year, they're going to have a record that reflects a team that could definitely make a run. Next, we have the Pistons. And I'm going to stick the Pistons in the Pat Bev Reacts category because another one, a young team that I can see getting pushed along with the Hornets. And, they just got Ivy, obviously. And they have, again, just a good group of young individuals that I think they're going to want to build around. So I don't think they're going to be really, really bad like the Magic or underperform like some of these other, like the Cavs or the Bulls. I think they're going to definitely outperform last year. And with, again, how weak the East is with the 10 teams, I could see them getting in over the Nets. I really could. So there's a lot of teams I could swap the Pistons in for like a 10 seed. So I'm going to put them in that category. On the West side, for the Kings, they're another tough one to place because I think they'll make the playoffs. Although anything but at least, getting out of the first round isn't going to help fans too much. So let's just stick them in the rob in the public category. I don't think they're even, going to be bridesmaids. Again, I think that role, again, as I said, the Kings this year remind me, or the Pacers this year remind me of the Kings last year. So basically, I see them just kind of swapping spots, where the Pacers might be the one that makes a slightly deep playoff run. I think the Kings won their first round. I'm almost positive. I can't remember who they beat, but I thought they got out of the first round. And the Kings are probably going to get booted pretty early this year, just because there's so much competition in the West. And I don't see why. Again, I think they would have done a few things with the Kings, like they did with the Lakers, some of these other teams, if they were going to definitely improve them. Suns, they're going to go in bridesmaids. Yes, they're robbing the public big time, but I also have them I think they're going to get to the Western Conference. Like I said, something like Lakers, Bucks, Lakers, Suns is what I think we're going to see in the Western Conference. I'm looking at Dallas, of course. So like I said, the West is very, very stacked. But when the Suns have this much talent, I do think that, again, just like the Bucks in the East, I think the Suns in the West are going to be the team to beat. So, again, I could put the Suns or the Bucks in the put a ring on a category, and again kind of cop out and say, well, it's going to be one of these four. But I'm really just trying to stick to the two that I think are going at this very moment. If I had a gun to my head and had to choose, I would go Celtics Lakers. I'm more sold on the Celtics, but for matchup purposes, I think the Lakers make sense. Sure, we can get Celtics Suns. I'm not saying we're not. That's why they're in bridesmaids. But I just feel like yeah, I'm going to stick with those two. Now we got the Spurs. Definitely Pat Bev reacts. Because if the Spurs make the play-in, which I 100% have them making, I think that would be considered a win after having the worst record last year. So I think while it might take them a little while to get Chet, they try and, again, whether you look at it from a realistic or a fake standpoint, I think it's scripted and they're going to make it look like Popovich is getting Wemby more NBA ready every game. Even from the aspect that it's real, you have Wemby and the fact that he is a rookie, so he's obviously going to develop as he goes on. So he's not going to have a crazy year, but they're playing good enough that I think they can definitely push Popovich's coaching as a reason that they're going to make the playoffs. Now the 76ers are an interesting one. Obviously, they're not really they're not really robbing the public anymore. And it just I'm going to put them right here. And yeah, that's good. Like I said, some of these teams do fit both categories. I basically did the best I could. Where are the Hornets moving to? There we go. I basically did the best I could as far as some overlap. So, like, again, the Suns are obviously going to be robbing the public as well as, in my opinion, going pretty far. So I'm trying to balance them the best I can. But Sixers, the reason I put them in bridesmaids and not I'm here to rob the public and not Bev reacts is because I really don't think their team changed too much. Because, again, Harden didn't produce in the playoffs, really. He had, like, 2 games where he did. And even though he will put up the numbers, he's just one of those guys who just seems to not get it done. They have already established Maxey as their secondary option. They had been doing that. Even last year here, there was games he'd put up a bunch of shots. So they added a championship player in Nicholas Batum. So I don't think the Sixers are just going to fall off the map. I still have them getting in the playoffs. I still think that they're going to do fine. If anything, it's just going to showcase Embiid more. And when you got Batum and Harris, you can definitely explain away why a team is good. That's exactly what the Heat were. They were a bunch of players who knew how to play as a team cohesively, and they were gritty. And then you throw in PJ Tucker. They got some depth. I think that the Sixers are going to have a much better year than people think. Like I said, this is why I have the Cavaliers and the Heat all the way down here, because I think the Sixers, who were basically even with those teams last year, they were better than the Heat, but they were basically all around that same category. I think they're going to outperform them, and that's why I have them above them. Same with the Nets. I think the Nets will even outperform, especially comparative to last year, a lot of these teams. Toronto Raptors are next, and I think they're in full-blown rebuilding mode. As far as, I just don't think they're going to be doing much with them. They kind of started it last year, then they lost Fred VanVleet, so you had a couple different things happen, and I just don't see much happening with the Raptors. I think they're going to be a pretty disappointing team this year, and they're one of the teams I have getting booted out of the playoffs. Like I said, I got the Pistons in there, and I got the Hornets in there, at least in the play-in. I think the Raptors are going to get booted out along with the Bulls for those play-in spots. And the Heat and Cavs, I think, at best are going to get low play-ins. But I wouldn't be surprised if one of those two didn't make the same with the Knicks. If out of these 3, I wouldn't be surprised if 2 just completely missed the playoffs. So next we got the Utah Jazz, and I don't think they're making the playoffs either. I don't think they're doing too much. Then again, people don't respect or expect too much out of them. So simply making the playoffs would be enough. But I don't think they're making the playoffs, so they can go in here too. So a lot of us fans out there might be, wanting to look into some other sports. At least if I'm accurate, like I said, I could be way off here. I'm being a little harsh on some of these teams. Like I said, it's kind of hard to place the Heat and Knicks. I suppose I could have tried to make that as specific spots as possible, but I just wanted to make it overall gist. And again, the Heat and Knicks, they certainly might make the playoffs. I'm not saying that the Pistons are definitely going to finish better than the Knicks, but I'm trying to compare it to last season and just see where each team is going to be as far as if they're going to improve or like I said, regress. And yeah, I do think that the Heat are going to have a rough year. So yeah, the Raptors, I have more faith in the Magic than I do the Raptors, just because of the treatment the Raptors have been getting. Warriors are always going to be here to rob the public. I went into this is the first video on my first channel, actually, that got shut down. I went into how Steph obviously received his send-off, and I don't think he's getting another ring. They're not going to have him ahead of LeBron on the ring list. And I think as long as you got Steph, Dre, and Clay, now you got Chris Paul, people are going to put money on the Warriors. I'm not saying they're going to get the same handle that the Suns are getting, but they're going to have money on them, and they're just going to be red herrings in the entire year, in my opinion. The Wizards definitely going in the Pat Bev Reacts category. Again, not a team that anyone thinks is going to be a contender. And again, that's the distinction I'm trying to draw. Teams that people believe can be contenders versus teams that people don't. And I think the Wizards are going to not be a contender, but I have them making the playoffs. So I think we're going to see something like the Wizards Hornets. And again, like the Pacers in the spot of the Cavs. But Pacers Hornets, or I'm sorry, not Pacers, Pistons Hornets instead of Raptors and Cavs. That's just personally what I think. And Wizards instead of the Bulls. Last year we got every playoff team right. The only one we got wrong was the Raptors made it in instead of the Wizards. The Wizards did not make it. This year I think the Wizards definitely do. I think they're pushing JP for a reason. I think that they definitely have a lot of big games, in his future, just based off of the way. Again, he got punched in the face. He took it like a champ. He got traded, and he didn't come out. He didn't do anything that somebody that might get themselves blackballed did. I think that's probably why he got a big contract. And I think they're gonna build around him and Kuzma and some other guys. So I think the Wizards are gonna get into the playoffs. Again, maybe they get the play-in. Probably the play-in's more realistic, but I think they're gonna be a lot better than people think. So this tier is basically dedicated to teams that you can get pretty good plus value on, maybe outside of the Nets. And I'm not as sold on the Nets as these other four teams, just because they don't have a specific draw. But like I said, the way they're handling Bridges makes me think he might play like Kawhi did, and the Nets might have a better year than people think. Next is the Grizzlies, and this is a tough one because they don't have Ja right now, obviously, and they're terrible without him. They're 0-4. So the question is, what's going to happen when they get Ja? I think they're going to get Ja, and it's weird to put them in this category, but I'm going to because I do think that their fan base is going to be engaged, and because of the circumstances, I mean, they arguably lost their two best players. I think Jackson Jr. would be their second best, but some would say it was Dylan Brooks. Now, they don't have Ja either, so 25 games in, they're probably going to have a pretty bad record. But if Ja redeems himself and starts playing well, then even if they do make the playoffs, I don't think they're going to do much, especially if Ja starts going nuts and they start playing crazy good. Right when the public gets on them is probably when they'll start losing. But I do think they'll find a way to at least, like I said, make a play-in, finish off the season well, give some fans some false hope. But I don't think they're going to do much beyond that. They got smart. They got enough players that I think they can make it work. But I'd normally have them in a higher category, like robbing the public. But since there's no Ja, there's not much public to be robbed, except later on in the season that might happen. And finally, we got the Timberwolves, and they're going to go right in here too. So basically, these are the teams I have missing the playoffs. And I know it seems, again, I'm sure the Heat, Knicks, and Cavs won't all miss the playoffs. But I'm just not sold on them. And even if they make them, again, I think the fans are going to be underwhelmed. But for the most part, I do think most of these teams are going to get bumped. I really like the Bulls to get bumped by the Wizards. I really like the Spurs and the Thunder to bump the Timberwolves and Jazz. So I basically have the teams that I think will get bumped and who I think will replace them in order. Of course, and there could be a couple switches, but this is my overall idea of where we get. So I think fans of these teams are not going to be too pleased. Of all of them, the Knicks would be the only one that I would say might be a little out of place. But again, I don't think anything more than almost going to the conference championship would be an improvement. And I really think that they're going to be a team that, like I said, maybe gets flipped by the Nets. And again, here's our moral victories. All these teams. I think, again, especially the Spurs, Thunder, Wizards. I think Pistons have a good shot of making the play-in, slash playoffs after not making it last year, and maybe even getting a first-round upset. Like the Thunder, I have as a playoff team. So That's already going to be an improvement. And I think the Spurs will get that play-in spot. So that in itself will be an improvement. So I like that. And again, the Hornets, they must have got moved. Yeah, the Hornets are not robbing anybody. But I do think they'll get in, like I said, on the east side. And the Hawks, again, they got the talent, so that's the reason I have them in here robbing the public. These are all teams that were established last year, did well. Sixers would be in here if they didn't have Harden, or if they didn't just get rid of Harden. And of course, the Suns, Nuggets, Bucks, they would be in here if I didn't think that they were actually going to go to their respective conference finals or have a very good shot of it, have really good records, things like that. And the Pacers, again, hard spot to put them in, but they're not really robbing the public because, no, again, not many people are going to be on them. But at the same time, I really think they're going to have a strong year. I think all season long, people are going to be waiting for them to, quote, fall apart, and it's not going to happen. And my Eastern and Western Conference pick, Celtics, again, made perfect championship moves. Lakers made perfect championship moves. The history makes sense to me. The draw makes sense to me. Basically, all of they both got the chutzpah that you need, coming off the bench from the young guys, especially Reeves. He's got a lot of that. So, yeah, I definitely like these teams. Like I said, we could see, just for a second to mess around, we could totally see Mavericks in there. I'm not saying we can't. I really don't see any other teams from the East making the finals, though. I don't know why. I really like the Celtics. I think they did everything you need to do to get the money off of them, but keep them where there's really no reason that they shouldn't get to the finals. So like I said, we'll see what happens. A couple of these may change contingent on trades, of course. But like I said, I wouldn't have had the Clippers rob in the public. I probably would have had them below that. But since they are now, they just acquired Harden, who is, still in pretty good form. He's obviously an addition to the team. I feel like a lot of public will be on them. So yeah, like I said, I'll do. It makes much more sense to do the playoff simulators closer to the season starting, or I'm sorry, the postseason starting, because then we actually have actual matchups to go off of. But I know people wanted me to go into essentially each team in depth, and I thought this was the best way of doing it. So if you want to know how I have my 1 through 10 exact, what I can say is on the East side, I have a feeling the best record is not going to be the Celtics. I don't know, they always do a decent job of that. I think the best record will probably come from the Bucks, or like I said, even the Pacers. I could see them doing like what they did with the Nuggets with the Pacers, where they just continue to have a really good year. But I would imagine maybe the Bucks have the 1 seed. Celtics, sure, they could get the 1 seed and win it. I mean, it's not like 1 seeds have never won before. On the West side, I think it's going to be a lot different. I think the Nuggets are definitely going to have the best record. I think the Lakers are going to get in the playoffs, but not run roughshod. I think they'll get in as a mid seed. I think even teams like the Pelicans, Suns for sure, will finish ahead of them as far as their records. I think they'll finish somewhere, the Lakers, of course, somewhere between 44 and 48 wins makes sense to me, and maybe a 5-6 seed. So they're believable, but they're not a complete underdog, so they're believable enough. But at the same time, they're not running roughshod through the league like I think the Nuggets are going to be doing. So like I said, especially with my OCD, I did my best to pick the right criterion for these teams and put them in their appropriate spots. If you disagree, if you think, nah, you're crazy, the Heat are definitely going back to where they were, or if you think the Cavs will, or if you think, no, there's no way that the Pistons or Wizards are going to do anything good, or the Pacers won't continue at this pace, whatever your, no pun intended there, whatever your opinion is. Obviously, I love insight, and I love, any kind of perspective that you guys might have. We could do more categories, go into more teams like this. I do like the tier program. I'm much a fan of graphs myself because I think it makes it a little easier to just kind of elaborate and, again, condense these teams into where I think that they're going to be as far as in the public eye. So, like I said, it won't be long. But I do think it's best to at least have some matchups, and I'll go into my finals. Like I said, not much has changed. If you want to see my video where I went into the playoff simulator and I did exactly who I think is going to win, and I went into the 1 through 10 seeds, who I think is going to be in the play-in, some matchups I see in the playoffs. I did do that video roughly a month ago. It wasn't that long ago at all. But like I said, now the season started, we can always do a amended one going into some possible playoff matchups that make sense now. Especially we had a trade in the West with Harden, so there's a lot of matchups that would make sense there. But yeah, hopefully you guys like this, and like I said, stuff keeps getting moved around. If we're aligned, that's usually a good thing, because if a bunch of us are seeing, yeah, I think the Hornets are going to do something, or yeah, the Thunder are being treated differently this year, then I think it means there's a better chance than not then we're on to something. But even if you disagree, of course, I would love to know why, because everybody has a different perspective, and all it does is help us kind of get a perfect gauge over what's going on. But yeah, I thought it was most important to show teams that I just think are going to have downfalls, and then of course teams that I think are going to rise, because that's where you're going to get the plus value by taking the Spurs instead of the Timberwolves, things of that nature. So like I said, it's by no means perfect, and it might be a complete joke by the time the playoffs come around, but I think this is pretty accurate. I tried to get them in the best spots I could, and as far as records, I tried to really put them in order, essentially. Some don't. Again, the Mavericks will probably have a better record than the Hawks, but they're in the same category, so nothing too crazy there. But yeah, again, I also tried to balance in the public, because some teams, again, like the Suns, they would fit both categories. The Pacers really don't. Pacers could even fit in the Pat Bev reacts, but I think they're going to have a good enough season. Again, if they do what the Cavs did last year, they had a good enough season, then I think that they'll be viewed as contenders. And I really wouldn't be surprised, again, if they won the first round and gave the Bucks a tough matchup in the playoffs. So that's the reason I have a little more respect on the Pacers name than some of these other teams. Just the way they're being pushed, I found interesting. So yeah, let me know what you think, and I'll have college games coming out pretty soon, as well as the all the upcoming NBA games. Last I checked, we were looking pretty good on the Knicks. Of course, anything could have happened, but I think hopefully we get that one. And the fact that it's International Magic Day, I like the Magic even more. Obviously, we already had them covering. Hopefully that comes through. And the Suns were the last one I had covering, because the Halloween themed. I thought, what are the odds the only orange and blackish teams are playing on the TNT games? So I found that interesting. So yeah, like I said, I hope you guys, I didn't want to make this too long, but I wanted to elaborate on every team, and I also wanted to try and justify their categorizations as far as why I believe they'll be respectively in these spots. So take care, everybody, and happy earnings.